Hello everybody and welcome back to Principles of Game Design. In this video we're going to be putting the finishing touches on our chair model and learning a bit about optimizing topology. So to start with, I'm going to go to my side view, and I'm actually going to go to my side view, go to left view, and I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to notice that the chair seat is actually at a bit of an angle. So we're going to go ahead and do that, select our chair seat, and we want to rotate it back a bit. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to rotate it until the lines are parallel with the chair seat in the image. And then let's go ahead and rotate, see how that looks. Maybe move it down a bit. Good. And now we need to move the bars underneath the chair seat. So we're going to move the front bar up. There we go. And we need to move the back bar down, because it's clipping through our chair seat. So let's move it down and back. Right about there seems fine. And then we need to angle the crossbars underneath the chair seat. So one more time, go to our rotate tool, hit E, and then rotate it just a bit. Make sure that it plugs into the front crossbars and the back crossbars. Move them up a bit. There we go. Alright, now that we've done that, let's also go ahead and fix a little bit more about our chair seat. We're going to be optimizing our topology. And what that means is that there's a bunch of edge loops and polygons that we just don't need because they're not really doing anything. So let's go to one view and let's talk a bit about that. If we look at this diagonal line here and this diagonal line here, they're pretty much straight, which means that all of these edge loops in the middle aren't really doing anything. So we're going to go ahead and hold Shift, and then double-click one of these edge loops, double-click one of these edge loops, double-click one of these edge loops, and then delete them. But remember that if you use the regular delete key, then we will be left with a bunch of vertices, and we don't want that because that creates hideous n-gons, and we get all of this loopy topology. So we're going to undo until we bring the edges back, and this time we're going to Control delete them, and that'll get rid of all of those unnecessary vertices. And notice that after we've deleted those edge loops, the shape of the chair hasn't really changed at all. So now we're going to do the same thing the other way around. Go back to our edge select, and if we look at this front edge, this is pretty much a straight line. And if we look at this back edge, this diagonal here feels pretty straight. So we're just going to go ahead and double-click this edge loop, double-click this edge loop, and delete them. And one more time, we're going to go to our smooth preview, see how that holds up. Let's deselect it. And that feels just about the same. So that feels good. Now that we've fixed the chair seat and lowered our poly count, let's touch on the chair legs. Because if we zoom in very closely at the bottom of the chair legs, we'll notice that they slightly clip through our grid line. It's a little bit more noticeable on the orthographic view. So we're going to need to fix that. In order to do that, I'm going to start by going into the side view after I have my chair leg selected, and I'm going to hit Control-1 to hide the background so that we can see better what we're doing. Then back in my perspective view, I want to give us a little bit more material to work with. So I want to select these bottom faces of my chair leg and extrude them down. In order to do that, I'm going to go to my face select, and this time, to make sure I'm only selecting the correct faces, I'm going to hold the Tab key. And you'll notice that that'll change my mouse into a little circle. When I hold left click, as I hover over faces, they will turn red. That is because I am painting a selection. When I let go of my mouse, you can see that I've now selected all of those red faces, and I haven't selected anything extra. So now that I've done that, I'm going to hit Control-E, and back in my side view, I'm going to use the blue arrow to pull slightly down, just so that I have more material to work with. Now that I've done that, I want to add a cut that is just going to go through across the grid line. So I'm going to grab my Multicut tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the X key. And if you remember from when we moved our bounding box last episode, the X key activates our snap to grid tool. So I hold X, and this little magnet will turn on. With my X key held, you'll notice that my mouse we'll grow the snap word. That reminds me that I am currently snapping to the grid, and as I hover over points on the grid, you'll notice that I make this little orange dot. So I'm going to go to the grid line right here, and I'm going to now hold left click. So I'm currently holding left click and X, and I can drag this little orange line. And what this orange line is going to do is it's going to let me cut straight through the chair leg. So I'm going to drag this orange line across my chair, and I'm going to make sure that it's perfectly flat, still holding the X key, still holding left mouse, and when I let go, I can zoom in and see that I've added in that extra edge loop that is perfectly flush with our grid line. So let's come over to our perspective view now, go to our select tool, that's by hitting Q. Let's go ahead and go to edge select, and I want to delete the diagonal edge loop. I'm going to hit F to recenter my camera on that edge loop, make sure that I've only got that one selected, and Control Delete. Then I'm going to go to face select and delete all of the faces underneath the grid. And now you can see this chair leg is perfectly flush to the floor. Now you'll also notice I have this hole on the bottom, and you might be tempted to go ahead and double click those edges, bridge them closed, and create an n-gon. Bad. You'll notice that by doing that, we've created this n-gon that creates this sharp point underneath, and you might then be tempted to grab the Multicut tool and attempt to patch that n-gon up. All of those steps are unnecessary, because if you really think about it, if this chair were in a video game, we wouldn't be seeing the underside of the chair leg at all, unless the player was going to knock this chair over. So since we don't need these faces underneath, you can actually just go ahead and not have them to begin with. So let's go ahead and get rid of them. And now, you're still thinking, well, there's this big hole underneath, but when we go and smooth preview it, we actually don't care. We're not going to care about having that hole underneath. It's not going to pinch like when we had the n-gon, and it's going to be perfectly fine. Now we also have this mangled goop on the other chair leg. We don't need to worry about that right now, because we can always just delete this chair leg and re-mirror this one. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and increment and save, Control-Alt-S. Now I'm going to go ahead and select this chair leg, Control-1, and we're going to go ahead and delete these top faces as well, because these faces are stuck inside of the chair seat. No one's ever going to see them. We don't need them. Control-1. We can see that we're not really losing anything. Alright, we actually can see this top corner, so I'm going to go ahead and go to Edge Select, double click, we can see those edges, and we're just going to move them up slightly. There we go, so that they're stuck inside of that chair. Alright, all of these edge loops in the middle aren't really doing a whole thing, because this taper is fairly linear, so we're just going to go ahead and select a bunch of these edge loops down the side, hold Shift, double click them. I'm going to leave this edge loop and this edge loop down here behind, Control Delete, and we'll notice that we really haven't lost any difference in the chair compared to what it used to look like. Go back to Object Mode, Mesh, and Mirror. There we go. Now we've optimized our front chair legs. Now let's go ahead and handle the back chair legs. Same thing to start with, we need to fix this bottom diagonal. So we're going to go to our side view, Control-1, Control-1, zoom into the bottom chair leg. Let's go to face select, because we need to give ourselves some more material to cut through. Hold Tab, so that we can paint our selection. There we go. Control-E to extrude. Drag them down. Go to our Multicut tool. Hold the X key and our left mouse button to get the knife. Drag it across our chair leg. Let go. Go to Edge Select. Select the diagonal edge loop. Hit F to recenter our camera. Make sure we're not selecting anything wrong. Control Delete. Go back to Face Select and delete the extraneous faces. And now that's our third chair leg fixed on the bottom. Let's go ahead and delete some of these edge loops. Same thing as we did previously. This time, let's pay attention to which edge loops we're deleting, because if we delete too many of them because of this curve, we're going to lose detail. So for instance, if we delete all of these edges here in the middle, let's go ahead and select those and Control Delete them, you'll notice that our bend snaps back to normal, and we're going to lose a little bit of detail there. We want to prevent that, so you sort of need to have an understanding of which edge loops are doing the heavy lifting and which ones aren't really doing a whole lot. So I'm just going to go ahead and select some edge loops that don't feel like they're doing a whole lot, delete them, and you'll notice that that hasn't changed the shape of my chair leg at all. I might even delete this edge loop here. There we go. Then I'm going to leave the ones around the bend intact, come up here, and maybe delete every other edge loop. See how that works. Control Delete. Let's change it slightly, but not terribly noticeably. So alright, I'm going to call that good on the back chair leg optimization, but I'm also going to go ahead and rotate around a bit and look at the top of my chair leg. Let's go back to our side view, Control 1, and you can see that the top of the chair leg is actually angled the same way as the backboard. So we need to fix that up. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select my chair leg and the backboard, both at the same time, hit Control 1, and I'm going to grab my Multicut tool. I'm going to make sure that I'm only selecting the chair leg, grab that Multicut tool, and I want to draw a cut that is parallel to the backboard. So I don't need to hold X, I can just click in the middle of nowhere, let go in the middle of nowhere, and the Multicut tool will still function as a knife. So I'm just going to go ahead and eyeball a cut that feels parallel to the backboard. That seems good. Let's zoom in over here on my perspective view. Go ahead and go to Face Select, delete the unnecessary faces, delete the top board, and then we're going to go ahead and bridge this end gun closed and use our Multicut tool to patch it up. Oop. There we go. Just connect all of the edge loops back together so that when we smooth it, we still get that nice square cut. Alright, let's go ahead and go to Object Mode. Let's select the chair and the backboard, see how that lines up. Oh, we didn't fence our backboard, but I'll explain why in a bit, so let's not worry about that for now. I just want to make sure that the backboard isn't clipping through the smooth chair leg. Alright, now that we've fixed the chair leg, let's go ahead and delete the opposite one. Go to Face, Goodbye, Mesh, and Mirror. Oh, go back to Object Mode, Mesh, and Mirror. There we go. So now we've fixed the 4 chair legs, let's fix that backboard. And the reason that I didn't have it fenced previously is because if you remember from having these holes down here at the bottom, we actually don't need to fence them if we delete some faces on the end. And the faces on the end we're going to delete, I'm going to select the backboards, Control 1, are these faces here. Because they are stuck inside of the chair leg, we can actually just go ahead and delete these because no one will see them. I'm going to go to 4 view real quick and you'll notice that those faces are hidden inside of the chair legs. We don't need them. Goodbye. And by deleting those chair leg faces, we can go ahead and smooth preview them and see that we actually don't need to fence the edges since those faces won't exist. So same thing on this side, delete those 2 end cap faces. Doesn't matter if you're doing it in smooth preview or not. Delete them, and there we go. Now there is one other thing we need to do about these backboards, and that's that if we bring back our reference images, they're actually bent so that they cradle your spine. So we need to go ahead and bend these slightly. So we're going to go back to Object Mode, Object Mode. Let's go ahead and unsmooth preview them for a second. Go up to our Mesh Tools, go down to Insert Edge Loop. I'm going to go ahead and bring this down from 8 to, let's say 5. Add in some vertical edge loops. And now we need to bend them back. So, Object Mode, Deform, Nonlinear, Bend. What an interesting way for that bend to spawn in. let's go ahead and rotate it so that it is facing the same way as our backboard. Hold J while we're rotating to make sure that it is snapping in increments of 15 degrees. We want to rotate it 90 degrees so that it lines up perfectly with our backboard. And then let's go ahead and plug in a curvature value so we can see which way we're bending. Currently bending back. We need to bend in the opposite direction. So let's go ahead and rotate our bend 180 degrees this way. There we go. And now we're bending in the correct direction. There we go. And now let's decrease our curvature from 30 to, oh, let's say 20. Maybe a little less, 15. That feels alright. And now we just need to delete by type history. But before we delete by type history, I'm going to go ahead and Control-Alt-S to get another increment and save. And now we'll delete by type history. And move the chair back into position. There we go. Now, same thing with the other chair. Back, we're going to go ahead and go to Deform, Non-Linear Bend. Rotate our bend into position, hold J. Increase our curvature, let's go to 15 again. Rotate our bend one more time, 180 degrees this way. Oop, didn't quite do it. There we go. Edit, delete by type history. And move it back into position. Good. Now let's smooth preview them, see if they're alright. Looks fine to me, but maybe they're a bit too cylindrical up top. They're fairly square, so we're also going to add some fencing. Go back to one view, Control-1. Let's go ahead and grab our Multicut tool, and hold Control as we add some fencing. Front and back. And smooth preview. And that looks quite a lot better. Control-1. Let's grab our legs. Oop. Smooth preview. That's looking a lot better. Alright. Now that we've done the backboard and the legs, let's also do all of the crossbars. So if we select our crossbars and Control-1, we'll notice that they also have extra faces. Now before I go ahead and delete these extra faces to save myself some time, I'm actually going to fence them ahead of time so that I don't have to do more edge loops. And again, I'm not going to do the other side because we can always mirror the first one. So go ahead and select the faces that are stuck inside of our chair legs, delete them, then delete the side that is old, go back to object mode, Control-1, mesh, and mirror. And now we have these two crossbars fixed. Let's do the front, back, and seat crossbars as well. So let's grab the front bar, Control-1, add in our fencing, select the faces we don't need, and we're not going to mirror this one, so I'm just going to come over here, select those faces as well, delete them. Oh, accidentally selected the back one. Undo that, delete them. There we go. Control-1. So that's the front bar complete. Let's move it up a bit. Alright, let's rotate around to the back. Control-1. Go ahead and grab our Multicut tool. 1 and 2. Faces. Delete those. Rotate around to the other side. Delete these. 3, Control-1. Looking good. And the last crossbars, we're also going to be mirroring these. So, face, Multicut, fence, fence, Shift, shift, shift. Shift, shift, shift. Delete. Grab the old one, delete it. Object mode, Control 1, Mesh, Mirror. Control Alt S. Make sure that we've got it all right. Let's go ahead and now select all of our mesh on our chair. And so that we don't have all of these individual pieces, I'm going to go ahead and combine all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and select the whole mesh and go to Mesh. And we've got a couple of options. Now you might be tempted to use some of the Boolean tools, but if we attempt to use Boolean Union, for instance, we're going to end up with some very messy geometry. So we're not going to worry about our Booleans for now. Instead, we're just going to go to Mesh and Combine. And what that's going to do is it's going to turn all of those objects into a single object. If we go over here to our outliner, you'll notice that we have this P-cube 11. That is our new combined mesh. If I deselect and click it, that is our chair. So I'm going to go ahead and undo our combining so that we can get a better look at what happened here. These were all of the objects that we had that went into our chair. So for instance, our chair legs were P-cube 3, our back chair legs were P-cube 2, etc. So when we select the whole lot, you'll notice that in our outliner they all get selected. Don't worry about P-cube 1 because that is our bounding box, if you remember when we set up our layers. So we just want everything but our bounding box. We go to Mesh and Combine, and that gives us this single object. Now that we have this single object, we can double click it, name it Chair, inside of our outliner, and now when we look at our object here in the attribute editor, we see that we have chair and a bunch of other things. If we go to our channel box, you can see that we've got this long list of inputs about cuts and mirrors and deleting and all sorts of fun stuff. So we're just going to go ahead and edit, delete by type history, and then all of those inputs go away. Our outliner clears itself, so we don't have all of those groups anymore. One more time, if I undo that delete by type history, you can see that we've got a bunch of these P-cube groups. They're all empty. We're just going to select our chair, edit, delete by type history, and they're all going to go away, nice and clean. And then finally, instead of incrementing and saving, I'm going to go ahead and file and save scene as chair underscore combined. And that'll let me know which file we have the finished chair in. Alright, join me in the next video where we're going to learn how to light and render.